the 56th Superintendent of the United States Naval Academy, Vice Admiral John R. Ryan, United States Navy.
Well, good evening and welcome back to your United States Naval Academy. I want to recognize some special people who are with us here tonight. I know that the hall is filled with that, but I would like to acknowledge our three distinguished graduates from last year who have joined us. First, Admiral Jim Holloway. Would you just raise your hand, please, so we can... Vice Admiral Bill Lawrence, I know you're here. And a good friend of all of us, Dr. John McMullen. John. We had some people who drove in from Houston to be with us tonight. Our new athletic director and his beautiful wife. Would Kathy and Chet Gladchuck please stand so we can see you? Welcome. Now, I know a few of you men have told me that you're not so fond of these black tie events, but you've got to admit that once you get dressed up, the reward is a room full of beautiful women. So no more complaints. I've also heard from a number of people from about, I guess it starts with about the class of 1960 and back, that many of you are on diets, you're giving up your favorite food, your favorite beverages. The superintendent would like to offer some advice tonight from my favorite saint, St. Augustine, and his plea to the Lord. I've slightly adapted and say, quote, "Give me the self-discipline to abstain from the pleasures of life, but not quite yet, Lord." Well, this is indeed a special night for all of us and for this institution. For more than a century and a half, the Naval Academy's job has been to produce men of great character and competence, and now men and women of great character and competence, to be leaders in our service and for our nation, in both peace and war. As we meet tonight, of course, our nation and all free people face yet another crisis. We will overcome this challenge like all the others that we have faced throughout our history, with strong leadership, with teamwork and perseverance. America will win this war. Now, when you read the brilliant careers of tonight's distinguished graduate recipients, it's clear that they've all been very successful. But I'm also reminded of Thoreau's statement that, quote, "Success usually comes to those who are too busy to be looking for it." I think that's so true of the five that we honor tonight. Obviously, they are also men of great character. President Lincoln once said, "Character is like a tree, and reputation like its shadow." The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. Tonight, we honor five more men who are indeed the real thing, and whose shadows extend well beyond the walls of this beautiful yard. Indeed, and in fact, they extend around this world and even into outer space. Memorial Hall is a fitting place to have such a ceremony. And I don't think that any of us can walk in here without being overshadowed by the names that appear over there to my right. They serve to remind every midshipman, past and current, that service to country and community demands each of us to rise above self-interest, and that honor, courage, and commitment are not mere words, but in fact a way of life. This hallowed hall reminds me of that timeless question asked by the losers in each war: where do you find such brave warriors? And the answer is obvious. The brave are found where the brave are honored. May it always be so at your United States Naval Academy. Again, welcome.
United States Naval Academy Distinguished Graduate Award. When we think of distinguished graduates from the Naval Academy, I'm sure that in each of our minds we have many and perhaps different names and faces. Some of you may be thinking of your father, your uncle, your son or daughter, or one of the many bona fide heroes who attended here, graduated, and then went on to make a difference in your life. Perhaps the name is inscribed here in this hall in a sacred place as a reminder to us that many have heeded the call to service and paid the ultimate price for a country and an ideal in which they so deeply believed and lived. Our Academy has thousands and thousands of graduates who have distinguished themselves, so how is it possible that a Distinguished Graduate Award can be made in a fertile environment of so many candidates? A few years ago, my predecessor, Rear Admiral Ron Marryott, class of 1957, envisioned the concept of a Distinguished Graduate Award, an award that would recognize graduates of the U.S. Naval Academy who had had a lifetime of exceptional achievement. With the help of Rear Admiral Bob McNitt, class of 38, among others, the concept was developed and formally presented to the Alumni Association Board of Trustees, which approved this proposal. And their approach was, frankly, brilliant. The Distinguished Graduate Award is given to a living graduate of the United States Naval Academy whose character, distinguished military and civilian service, and stature draw wholesome comparison to the qualities that the U.S. Naval Academy strives for, in keeping with its traditional values of duty, honor, integrity, and through knowledge, sea power. With the purpose of identifying to the public and brigade of midshipmen the broad national significance of the Naval Academy as one of the nation's cherished institutions, candidates for the Distinguished Graduate Award will be living graduates of the United States Naval Academy who have provided a lifetime of service to the nation or armed forces, have made significant and distinguished contributions to the nation via their public service, and this is especially, have demonstrated a strong interest in supporting the Navy and the United States Naval Academy. These men tonight are then part of our living legacy. They are the veritable six-stripers of our extended brigade, a brigade which now includes over 68,000 graduates since that first spring examination in 1846, a brigade which will include at least another 68,000 graduates who will follow their example and extend their legacy. Admiral Smith, Vice Admiral Ryan, would you please join me here at the podium? Thank you, gentlemen. It is now my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce you individually to this year's Distinguished Graduate Awardees, beginning with the most senior class present and descending to the most junior.
John W. Crawford entered the Naval Academy class of 1942 as the world stood on the brink of war. Jack, as he was known to friends at the Academy, was a dedicated student, graduating 4th in his class. As a midshipman, Jack excelled in lacrosse, but as a New Hampshire native, his passion was skiing. The lucky bag called Jack a clear thinker who is able to concentrate on the job at hand. 12 days after Pearl Harbor, Jack and his classmates left the Academy and went to war, beginning his 22-year active duty career. After a few months at MIT, Jack reported for duty aboard the USS Yorktown, and 5 days later was among the survivors as the great carrier sank during the Battle of Midway. Following the war, Jack continued his education at MIT, earning a master's in naval construction and engineering, while also serving as an engineering duty officer at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. In 1949, Jack joined the staff of Admiral Hyman Rickover, playing a key role in development of the Navy's nuclear program. After retiring from active duty, Jack joined the Atomic Energy Commission in 1965, serving as assistant director for all non-naval reactor work. He held senior positions at the Department of Energy, including Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy. In both his military and civilian careers, Jack always emphasized a disciplined engineering approach that enhanced both the military and civilian nuclear programs. His support of the Naval Academy is wide-ranging. He served as a blue and gold officer and arranged an area lacrosse clinic involving Navy coaches and players. Among all his accomplishments, Jack rates his marriage to wife Betty as number 1. Jack and Betty live in Maryland, where they spend as much time as possible with their 4 children and their families. John W. Crawford came of age with nuclear power and has left his mark, helping to create a stronger Navy and a stronger nation.
Admiral and Mrs. Ryan, Admiral and Mrs. Smith, Admiral and Mrs. Trost. I would like to thank the Naval Academy and the Naval Academy Alumni Association for this extraordinary honor. It is over 60 years on since I took the oath of office as a midshipman right out there. My feelings at that time were very much my feelings now, of extraordinary good fortune and a profound gratitude to those institutions and individuals who have brought me here I would like to thank first my parents, the late Judge and Mrs. Crawford, John W. Crawford of Tilton, New Hampshire. Life under their guidance was structured around God, family, and education. Thus, I went to a private preparatory school in our town, Tilton School. Tilton had an accomplished faculty, exacting standards of conduct, and a classical curriculum, New England style. Townies like myself were sent to Tilton with all expenses paid by an enlightened townspeople. Thus, I owe a great debt to Tilton School and also to the people of that fine town. Transcending this debt is that which I owe the Academy itself. Here I found the sure foundation and the strong motivating force which has informed all my later endeavors. I found demanding academics, wide-ranging athletics, the best of roommates in Gene Madden, and the camaraderie of the great class of 1942. Now I know you're going to say that all Naval Academy classes are by definition great, and I agree with you. But still, I think I might be permitted to invoke a phrase that Winston Churchill used of himself and say that 42 has a certain glow about it, and I thank them from the bottom of my heart for their having recommended me for this award. The Navy itself was very generous to me in sending me on to MIT 3 times. MIT was a great learning experience and extremely helpful to me in carrying out the duties to which I was later assigned. It was also a help in academics, and beyond that, in providing a reservoir of resolution upon which to draw in difficulty, of which there were very many. Still, the greatest reason for my being here tonight is my wife, Betty. The constant support and abiding inspiration of our 48 years together. The fact that I was able to spend so many years in naval nuclear propulsion is due more than anything else to her willingness to accept the extra sacrifices that such duty entails, and to absorb and shoulder and carry out responsibilities that were properly mine. But of course, accomplishments, especially in the Navy, are very much dependent on those with whom we work. Thus, it was my great good fortune that by far the most of my Navy career in engineering was spent in close working relationship with officers of the submarine force, in conventional boats at first, then later and longer with those in nuclear ones. Let me give you one example of what I mean by that type of experience. I will mention the submarine Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was built by the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Dock Company. It was the first ship outside of Groton that embodied 3 new technologies: nuclear power, missile technology, and submarine technology, all new to Newport News. The shipyard did a superb job, and the reason they did so is because they had a masterly genius and a gentleman named Admiral Rim Rawlings, as we all popularly knew him. He ran that shipyard, and he ran it smoothly. I'm pleased to tell you that his daughter, Mrs. James Holloway, is looking at me now as I say these words. The performance of the shipyard was even more extraordinary when one remembers that while building Robert E. Lee, Newport News was also building the world's first aircraft carrier, the 8-reactor USS Enterprise, later commanded by Admiral James Holloway, who is also with us here this evening. But there was a counterpart to this superb yard performance, and that was in the officers and men of the USS Robert E. Lee itself. As much as credit is due the shipyard, it must be given an equal degree to the men, officers and men of Robert E. Lee under the magnificent leadership of Reuben Farrier Woodall, class of 1943. In the era of which I speak, a fair fraction, perhaps even a majority of submarine officers were Naval Academy graduates. In working with them over the years, I experienced at firsthand the finest flowering of the attributes which this school endeavors to engender in its graduates. I was also fortunate in my associates in the Naval Reactors Organization. They brought their large talents at a time when nuclear engineers were scarcer than hen's teeth, at a time when the Navy and the nation needed their talents most urgently, and they did a superb job. Admiral Ryan writes repeatedly, of the role of this institution in providing leaders for Navy and the nation. Certainly Naval Academy graduates were there for both at the Battle of Midway, when the fate of this nation really hung literally in the balance. Over 90% of the commanding officers of the Navy and Marine Corps units in that engagement were graduates of this school. Over 80 of my classmates were also there, merely six months away from this establishment. And graduates are there for the Navy and nation today. Let me give you an example. Having served in the Navy, many graduates experienced in nuclear power have gone on to be members of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, its staff, and even more broadly, in the upper reaches of the utility organizations of this country which are endeavoring to apply nuclear power. So effective and far-reaching has been their influence that the Naval Reactors standard is now the American standard, not always achieved, but ever sought for. This is a momentous accomplishment and one that has large implications for the energy situation in the years ahead. And so it may go on. May this academy continue on from strength to strength, serving Navy and nation till all of time be done. I thank you.
Oklahoma native William Crowell entered the Naval Academy class of 1947 with a strong interest in international politics. The lucky bag described Bill as smooth in his ability to convince everyone he was right, helping him earn debating and oratory honors. After a stint on the White House staff, Bill earned advanced degrees from Stanford and Princeton. In the submarine service, he took command of the USS Trout. In the 1960s, Bill went to Vietnam as a senior advisor to the South Vietnamese Navy. Back home in 1971, Rear Admiral Crowell held a series of strategic post and military commands, culminating in his selection in 1985 by President Reagan to become the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There was almost no job Bill didn't hold, including actor, as he made a cameo appearance on the hit TV series Cheers. In 1989, following 47 years of service to his country, Admiral Crowell retired from active duty, but his days of service were far from over. In 1993, he was appointed chairman of the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. A year later, he was appointed as the United States Ambassador to the Court of St. James, the United Kingdom. Looking back, he considers the development of a trusting friendship with his Soviet counterpart, Marshal Sergei Akrameyev, one of his proudest accomplishments. Today, Bill shares his knowledge and years of insight with future naval officers, holding an endowed chair at the U.S. Naval Academy. Bill and his wife Shirley live in Alexandria, Virginia, and spend as much time as possible with their 3 children and their families. Admiral William Crowell, a wise leader and role model who is passing on his wisdom to the next generation.
I find that video a little scary. That introduction was a little more elaborate than I'm used to. I suppose a little flattery is all right as long as you don't inhale. I should say at the outset that I thought that was a low blow on Cheers. I spent 47 years in uniform, and I'm going to be remembered most for 7 minutes on Cheers. Although it was an adventure. I speak for myself and Shirley when I say that this has been a genuinely moving day for us, as you can imagine, how much it means to us. And I thank all those responsible, and particularly this institution. I grew up with 2 pictures of the USS Pennsylvania over my bed. That was the ship my father served on in World War I as a radioman second. From the time I was 8, I had only one burning ambition: to attend the U.S. Naval Academy. It's fair to say that once I arrived here, I found life sort of confining, something that I was not used to in the state of Oklahoma. We believe in freedom in Oklahoma. And I spent a great deal of time trying to outflank the system. As a matter of fact, there's several of my Confederates in crime in the audience tonight. I won't say more about that, to say except that I was only successful in only a very limited fashion. I never was really good at getting around the system, but I never regretted being here. It was the greatest choice of my life. Certainly my affection for this institution grew as I joined the fleet. I found the values and the attitudes that were implanted here were extremely valuable. They shaped my life, and more importantly, they sustained me in times of trial when the world closed in, and we all know that it does close in. I'm eternally grateful for that. I would suggest, or rather I would submit, that saying on the wall, "Don't give up the ship," is not only a motto, it's a way of life. A way of life promoted by this institution and that has served our country extremely well. I suspect that there are few institutions where classmates and the class loyalty play such a great role in the shaping of both the personal and the professional lives of its members. That was certainly true in my case. Your classmates expect you to perform, your classmates expect you to be loyal to them, and it's a duty you cannot put aside. that you must honor. In this regard, I would like to mention one of my classmates. You're going to be hearing more from him, but I still feel impelled to. I find it humbling to be honored in the same program with Jim Stockdale, who is not only a classmate and a friend, but a bona fide hero, one of the few I ever knew personally. He and I entered the Naval Academy together the same day. More interesting and more strange, we graduated the same day as well. And here, 58 years later, we're being honored as well. My class has always held him in the highest esteem, this man of exceptional bravery. The class of 47 is extremely proud of him. There's one other person who did not graduate from this institution, but who I would suggest is an honorary member of the class of 47 that I should mention, and that is my wife, Shirley. She is the one person who fully appreciates my attachment to this school and who understands what it means to me to be honored by the Academy. The smartest thing I ever did was marry Shirley Grinnell. Whatever my accomplishments, she has been an integral part of every one of them. We did it together. It was a team effort. And as I tell my students who are contemplating marriage, never underestimate the value of nagging. But she was a marvelous Navy wife. She knew how to nag right. One last comment. I currently teach at the Naval Academy, which was pointed out in this scary video. I can assure you that the spirit, the pride, and the values which drew me to this institution are alive and well. I see midshipmen in action every day of the week. They are some of the finest the nation has. I have no qualms about the relevance of the Naval Academy, and I certainly have no concerns about the future contributions that it is going to make both to the school, to our Navy, and to our Republic. John, you preside over a wonderful institution. Again, thank you for this great honor.
James Bond Stockdale entered the U.S. Naval Academy class of 1947, undecided whether to choose service in submarines or aviation. He honed his leadership skills at the Academy, excelling at both academics and the social scene. When it came to athletics, Jim's hard work on the gridiron earned the praise and admiration of classmates. His lucky bag prophecy profoundly observed that it would be a lucky man who found himself deployed with stock. After graduation, Jim married Sybil Bailey. He then served as an officer aboard minesweepers and destroyers before starting his training as a Navy fighter pilot in 1950. After successful assignments in flight squadrons, Jim landed at the Patuxent Naval Air Station, where he tested the Navy's latest jets and served as an instructor. In between assignments, flying the F-8 Crusader, Jim earned a master's degree from Stanford. When the Vietnam War escalated in 1964, Jim was there, leading the defense of the destroyer Maddox in the Gulf of Tonkin. Jim was in his second combat tour in Vietnam when on September 9, 1965, he was shot down and captured by the North Vietnamese. 7.5 years of imprisonment followed, over half of it in solitary confinement. Much of the time he endured brutal torture at the hands of his captors. As the senior officer and resistance leader among the POWs, Jim was singled out for especially harsh torture. His stubborn refusal to break inspired his comrades, discouraged his captors, and resulted in the end of POW torture. It remains his proudest achievement, earning him the Congressional Medal of Honor and the gratitude of his fellow POWs, including Bill Butler, who quotes from the poem Invictus when he describes Jim.
In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloodied, yet unbowed.
As a civilian, Jim has been a college president, a teacher, a senior research fellow at the Hoover Institution, and the 1992 Reform Party vice presidential candidate. Jim and Sybil, who wrote a best-selling book together, enjoy spending time with their 4 sons and their families. Jim Stockdale, whose honor, courage, and commitment inspired his friends and his country.
There are absolutely no words to describe the stark differences between my surroundings here tonight and those of 35 years ago here tonight. 35 years ago tonight. I have been honored at many ceremonies, but to be honored as a distinguished graduate of this school means more to me than most of all the others put together. For my days spent here were more than school, but rather a laboratory that prepared me for my 8 years imprisonment many years later. Hanoi incarceration takes place in dungeons, not prison camps of any kind. But I was fortunate indeed to be locked up with wonderful Americans whose level of humor could not be completely stamped out no matter what the torturers came up with. I was first exposed to this great sense of humor when on a clammy cold morning about 6 months after being captured and had a broken leg and a broken back, I was given a pair of crutches and told to take a shower in a barren, rusty stall. When I finally was able to get a dribble of cold water to run from that shower head, I looked up and saw a message in English, scratched into the cement with a rusty nail. "Smile, you're on candid camera." For the first time in weeks, I did smile. Other Americans were nearby, but so far it was rare to catch a glimpse of any of them. I was shot down as Air Group Commander of the USS Oriskany in September 1965. By the summer of '67, we were getting 2 or more Alpha strikes every day. Hanoi was out without electrical power and wells were running dry. By October, 11 of us were recognized spoilers, troublemakers. The Vietnamese decided to exile me and my 10-mile gang to their Army headquarters prison that had nothing to do with the prison system. This was a separate institution. We 11 were there, the only prisoners, all in solitary, all wearing leg irons 16 hours a day. We named this little place Alcatraz. What else? We had only one Vietnamese junior officer over us, a fair English speaker, and he would just call us in about one by one every month or so for what we called an attitude check. What is this guy up to? Typically, he would hand out a sheet of propaganda and then ask us what we thought of it. Jim Mulligan, one of my 11 guys, sat in for one of those and proclaimed the document ridiculous. Now, this officer knew what ridiculous meant and took it as an insult and shook his fist and told Mulligan to try again. Mulligan, the Boston Irishman actor, "I'm sorry, sir. What I meant to say, it's bullshit." Now, the officer, going by Mulligan's tone of voice and never having heard of bullshit, smiled and said they always wanted English idioms to make friends with us. He said, "That's more like it. Keep a civil tongue in your head." Through our covert communication, that story made the rounds of every cell that night. So that's the way we live. Thanks for listening to my jailhouse stories. In February of next year, I've been invited to receive the Chester Nimitz Award. It was Chester Nimitz who gave me my diploma on 5 June 1946 in Dahlgren Hall right here. Chester Nimitz Award will have significance in many ways than one. While in solitary during the fall of '69, I heard on the camp radio that a new aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, was then a member of the fleet, now a member of the fleet. Shortly thereafter, I got word surreptitiously that a tough prisoner friend, Dave Hatcher, had given me a personal code name to the rest of the group, and it was Chester. Now that game gave me considerable pleasure during my months alone, as I imagined Dave had chosen Chester for my name, thinking of me as his leader and commanding officer, as Chester Nimitz had been for others in World War II. Later, I had a chance opportunity to whisper to Dave Hatcher. I thanked him for that complimentary name, Chester, and he said, "I thought you would be just perfect for that name, so new prisoners can pick you out of a crowd. You know, you walk just like that guy Chester in the TV program Gunsmoke." Well, I can't thank Bill Crow enough for those remarks he made about me, and I'm just as much in love with him as he is with me. We've been a good team for all these years. I thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have talked to you tonight.
With World War II fought and won, California native James Watkins entered the U.S. Naval Academy's class of 1949, part of a new generation of leaders that would fight and win the Cold War. At the Academy, Jim mixed success on the crew team and in the classroom with ease, and was known for his ability to see humor in any situation. The lucky bag predicted the future would find Jim with a pair of wings and a permanent home in Pasadena. But after leaving Annapolis, Jim served aboard destroyers, cruisers, and submarines. Along the way, he earned a master's in mechanical engineering and completed a reactor engineering course at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. His broad knowledge of naval operations propelled Jim up the Navy's chain of command. As a flag officer, he served as Chief of Naval Personnel, Commander of the 6th Fleet, Vice Chief of Naval Operations, and Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. In 1982, President Reagan tapped Jim to become Chief of Naval Operations. After retiring from active duty in 1986, Jim was selected by President Reagan to chair the Presidential Commission on AIDS in 1987. In 1989, he joined President Bush's cabinet, serving 4 years as Secretary of Energy. Since leaving the government, Jim served as president of the Joint Oceanographic Institutions until 2000. He also founded and served as president of the Consortium of Oceanographic Research until 2001. Earlier this year, President Bush appointed Jim to the Presidential Commission on Ocean Policy. Among his proudest accomplishments, improving pay for sailors and his role in forming America's strategic defense policy. He recently attended the commissioning of grandson George at Duke University, making the 3rd generation of Watkins men to embark on a Navy career. He enjoys spending time with his wife Janet and their combined family, including 10 children and 10 grandchildren. Jim Watkins' love of the sea led him to the Navy, and his talent, energy, and dedication have served both the Navy and the world's oceans.
This is not some changing or superficial slogan. No, this is the absolute pillar on which we stand. This code frames our distinction from those who would espouse a relativistic approach to national behavior. This code is the nation's anchor to windward when the going gets tough. And the going is now tough. So I'm more proud than ever to be one of the Naval Academy's pampered sons of Uncle Sam. And I think my award colleagues tonight would join me in dedicating any recognition that we may have received by this special award tonight, and dedicate that recognition to those many Naval Academy graduates lost in the recent tragic events. Heroes whom I consider particularly worthy to be called distinguished graduates. For they, along with so many other American heroes in this immediate tragedy, have inspired us, as Lincoln said, to save our country. Thanks very much.
From the time he was a small child, listening to his uncle's sea stories, James Lovell had two dreams: to attend the U.S. Naval Academy and to fly. He got his chance to realize both dreams when he entered the Naval Academy class of 1952. As a midshipman, Jim earned a reputation for his academic skill, but modestly replied that he was just trying to keep his head above water. The lucky bag predicted that, as an officer, Jim's easy manner and will to make good should carry him far. It certainly did. Following a tour as a naval aviator and test pilot, Jim was selected for the U.S. space program, joining the Gemini team of astronauts in 1962. At NASA, Jim's dream took flight. He filled backup roles for Gemini 4 and 9. On his first mission, Gemini 7, Jim accomplished the first docking of two-man spacecraft, taking his passion for the blue and gold into space with him. Next came the Apollo program. Jim served as command module pilot on Apollo 8, the very first voyage to the moon, becoming the first naval officer to travel to the lunar body. In 1970, as mission commander of Apollo 13, Jim was headed back to the moon when an onboard explosion crippled the spacecraft. For days, the world held its breath as Jim and his crew defied the odds and brought Apollo 13 safely home. For his courageous effort, Jim received the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. After retiring from the Navy, Jim excelled in the corporate world and founded his own company, Lovell Communications. Jim lives in the Chicago area with his wife, Marilyn. They have 4 children and 11 grandchildren. Jim Lovell, whose dreams of flight led him to the Naval Academy, and whose courage in space inspired the world.
Admiral Ryan, Admiral Smith, fellow awardees, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First, let me say that I'm deeply honored to be selected as a distinguished Naval Academy graduate. When I think of the many living graduates of this institution that have contributed to the success of this country, to uphold its traditions and its standards, I really feel deeply humbled to be here tonight. The Navy was my surrogate father. My father died when I was 12. My mother eked a living as a secretary to support both of us. I lived in a one-room apartment. I mean that, one room. The bed went into the wall. The bathroom was down the hall, shared by other tenants. The kitchen was against the wall that you could close just with a couple doors. I slept on the couch. College for me was almost impossible. This wasn't the days of student loans or grants. I never thought that I would ever get past high school. My uncle was a graduate of the Academy back in 1913, was one of the early naval aviators. And he told me, he said, "Jim, apply to the Academy." I did as a junior in high school, but I didn't make it. And then Admiral Holloway, God bless his soul, initiated the Naval Aviation Midshipman Program, the Holloway Plan. And suddenly I was accepted, received 2 years of college, and I found myself in flight training. And then the appointment to the Academy came forth. I was reluctant to accept it at first. Here I was, a midshipman, 2 years of college, in flight training. But then the Navy came back again and saved me in the form of an old salt, Captain Jeter, who was the head of the pre-flight at that time. He called me and he said, "Son, do you want to make the Navy your career?" "Yes, sir." "Then get up to the Naval Academy, get your education when you can." And he was absolutely right. I came here, not only did I get a good education, but I got the confidence and the self-reliance that stayed with me throughout my entire career. I had the privilege, a month or so ago, to talk to the plebe class, 2005. I took the opportunity to tell them what a grand opportunity they had to be here, whether they knew it or not just to get a good academic education, but also to get the tenets of leadership, to develop good teamwork, to get initiative and motivation and know how to persevere in the times that they will face in the future. And then, of course, last week's tragedy will make that a lot clearer for the classes that leave here. I've often fantasized, long before that tragedy weeks ago, if it would be possible somehow to take the dissidents, the rabble-rousers, the terrorists, and transport them to where Frank Borman and Bill Anders and myself first saw the Earth as it really is. A small planet tucked away around a normal sun on the edge of a galaxy. You see the blues of the ocean and you see the whites of the clouds. You don't see boundaries. You don't see people, no blacks or whites, no Christians or Jews, no French or Greeks. The Earth looks completely uninhabited. And yet you know that on planet Earth, there are 5 billion astronauts all striving for the same things in life. I just wish that more and more people could see the Earth and to know that we have to live and work together. Again, on behalf of my wife Marilyn, who has been my shipmate for 49 years, we got married here 3 hours after I graduated. I just want to thank the Naval Academy and the trustees for this honor that they bestowed upon me. Thank you.
We've now come to the end of this wonderful evening. While we have seen the legacy of the Naval Academy's past through the accomplishments of our 2001 distinguished graduates, throughout the weekend we have seen the present, manifested in every midshipman of this magnificent brigade, every officer and faculty member posted here. And what of the Naval Academy's future? It is ambitious, it is bright, it is clear. It is a future, in fact, centered in excellence. Admissions excellence, academic excellence, character excellence, leadership excellence, and athletic excellence. It is about developing leaders of great character like those we have honored tonight. It is all about the moral, the mental, the physical development of midshipmen to become commissioned officers for the Navy and Marine Corps. Simply stated, it is about producing leaders to serve the nation. Shortly, we will sing together our alma mater, Navy Blue and Gold. And although we all can sing from memory the first verse, tonight's gathering gives me an opportunity to quote from the last verse. But still, when two or three shall meet, and old tales be retold, from low to highest in the fleet, we'll pledge the blue and gold.